Howdy, and welcome to the Aggie Teach Momentum podcast, brought to you by the Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences program at Texas A&M University. I am your host, Kenrick Davies, former high school physics and astronomy teacher and current program coordinator for Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences. This podcast is meant to provide a little more insight and information to those seeking a secondary content teacher certification in Texas. We aim to provide episodes that help pre-service educators on the path to certification, as well as leverage the experience of myself and other guest speakers to support teachers in their first few years in the classroom. Today's topic is interviews and how they should be a two-way conversation, and we have a guest in the studio with us today. Please welcome Barclay Osborne, who is a former science teacher, science educator, and is now the Associate Director for Career Services at the Career Center at Texas A&M, and she works specifically with the College of Arts and Sciences. So thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Kenrick. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
That is great. I know that the Career Center is a massive resource for everyone on campus, and so I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to join us for the podcast. So why don't we go ahead and get into it? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you can do for Aggie Teach students in the Career Center?
Oh, I would love to do that. Aggie Teach, what a phenomenal program. Well, at this very moment, I am actually the Associate Director in the Career Center who does work with the College of Arts and Sciences, and we offer a variety of services to help you guys. We can help with everything from resume prep and cover letters. A big one is helping with mock interviews and getting ready to have that face-to-face as well as those Zoom interviews because they prepare a little differently. And then also, where do you want to be? What kind of classroom do you want to be in? Helping you to do a little career exploration inside of that. And I'm super passionate about working with Aggie Teach because, as Kenrick had said, I am a former educator who absolutely loved every moment of every day. I do actually miss my kiddos quite often. So I have 20 years in the classroom. I taught in K-12 education. I specifically taught anywhere from 5th grade to 12th grade, all the sciences, as well as a little history here, there, and yonder. I coached for several years, both basketball and golf. And so I have a very, very passionate background for helping people to find their right place because it will make a difference for a lifetime. So thank you guys for having me here and being excited about being in education.
That is awesome. I'm not sure if I knew everything about your background, so that was great to hear. I do feel like sometimes we get some negative sides of teaching, right? No one wants to be a teacher. That's what at least we're told in the media. So I absolutely love hearing from former educators about how they would absolutely be back in the classroom given the opportunity. Thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do. So why don't we just jump straight into it? Let's get into our questions so we can really delve into this topic about interviews, because I know that's kind of a anxiety-inducing topic for a lot of new teachers. So what is one question that a teacher candidate should be expecting when interviewing for the first teaching position, and what tips do you have about answering that question?
Well, like all teachers, I can't answer just one. I definitely have two for you. But two that I find fairly consistent questions are going to be about classroom management and student engagement. So with all the things that we hear this day and age, one of the things they're going to ask you is, how do you handle classroom behavior and discipline? They're going to want to know right off the top, are you comfortable managing your classroom?
Yeah, classroom management is probably the biggest request that we get in our program, both from alumni and current students. It's just how do you do that? And I feel like that's one of those topics where it's hard to teach. It's hard to teach classroom management. You kind of have to get in there and figure it out. So what is it that is going to help them answer that question, especially if they're first-year teachers and don't really have a whole lot of experience?
That's wonderful. And what they're looking for is transparency. They don't want you to make anything up, but they want to know, where have you handled situations in the past? Were you able to do some classroom management when you did your student teaching? What kind of management were you taught in class? Or where have you seen good or bad classroom management that you might want to implement or absolutely know is not the way you want to go? So they're really looking for you to have that conversation and not just lean into, well, I do whatever the school says. They want to know what you've seen, that you're confident, and that you're willing to learn multiple ways of yes and no in the classroom for sure.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on my first principal who hired me. I remember asking her years later, how did I do in the interview? And she goes, well, you were really green. So I was reflecting, I was thinking, like, they don't expect you to know everything as a first year teacher, like going into your first year, right? They just want to know that you're willing to try and that you have ideas, that you're willing to mesh with the campus culture, mesh with the admin regulations, and all of that stuff. So I appreciate that. What was the second one that you had?
The second one, I really think that they're going to ask her, what techniques do you use to keep students motivated and involved? Now, this can be anything from things you've done if you were volunteering somewhere, again, going back to when you were doing some student teaching. Hopefully you had lots of opportunities in some of your upper level classes to really practice and talk about what kind of techniques you might use. And again, watching what the other teachers have been doing and what you think you could emulate, or what really you know might not work for you. And so they're looking again for that transparency of enthusiasm and knowledge, as well as what questions you might be asking about their campus and the way they do things there, and how you could mesh those two together.
Yeah, I think our program, the Aggie Teach program, does a really good job with kind of marrying those two together, because again, our students are content majors, they're history majors, they're science majors, so they have the knowledge. But they also have the secondary education minors, so they have all the pedagogical classes. So I would say that if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you are probably over the top prepared for what to expect in your first year. Now, it's still anxiety inducing, but you get in there and you by and large will know what to do in most situations. And I think conveying that somehow in an interview is probably put you at the top of the list, if I had to guess.
I completely agree with that. And I think being confident to know that you can state what you've learned and what you're excited about putting into practice will also be something that puts you out at the top of the list for them.
Yeah, we have the opportunity to do a education career fair, so I have the opportunity to kind of schmooze with a whole bunch of recruiters from different districts. And more often than not, what I hear is that our students know how to communicate. They know how to communicate what they know, what they need, and so they are sought after by these districts because of the preparation program that they're going through. So what is a good example, since we've been talking about having this, asking good questions, what is a good example for a teacher candidate to ask during the interview?
Well, the one thing I want to say is, please don't ever say, "Oh, I think you've answered all my questions," before you've asked a few. Even if they have, always have a few in your back pocket that are a little bit different, that are engaging for the other side of the table. So you can ask questions that are going to be specific to you and your preparation, but also then turn around and ask the recruiters. Ask them, say, what do students like about coming to school here? Allow them to really glow and shine and sell their campus so that you can see the pride and the enthusiasm they have.
I think as a new teacher coming to, especially if you're moving, especially if you're like putting out a wide net of resumes and going to a new town, new district that you have no knowledge about, you got to ask a question. And you're like, why do the students want to keep coming back every day? What is the biggest draw for that particular campus? Why should you want to work there? I mean, don't ask that question, maybe. You got to be asking questions that give you information about whether or not you want to work there, right? I mean, if you get a feeling that the students don't even want to be there, then maybe that's not the best place for you. And so as a former educator, what are some of the topics that you think teacher candidates need to ask during that interview to help them make a decision about where they want to go? Because they're going to have options.
Oh, they absolutely are going to have options. And just referencing a moment ago, remember, yes, you're on an interview, but so are they. You can turn them down. Even if they offer the job and it's not the place for you, that's okay. So remember, an interview is always two ways. That's why we're talking about it as a conversation. But things for you to think about and questions for you to ask when you are trying to decide, is this the place for me? Again, ask about that team culture. Will you have a grade team? Will it be just an entire campus team? What does that look like on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? How often do you get together? How often do you plan? So knowing what that looks like on a day-to-day basis is a fabulous engagement piece.
Yeah, I think one of the best tools that maybe a teacher candidate has, and this is maybe getting a little bit outside the interview, scope of the interview, but multiple times whenever I was interviewing at a district, I went in for a visit. So not even just the interview. It may have been after the interview, day after, a week after, but they invited me in to come visit the school, which I think is a really good sign for a school. If they they want you because they are engaging with you after the interview, but they're also inviting you to come back and see their schools, visit a classroom, visit a teacher, talk with teachers during their PLC or over lunch. So multiple times I did that, and that really helped me decide, I think, where I wanted to put down roots. If I was ready to move from one place to another and I was planning on moving, where is it that I was going to go? I ended up turning down a job because the culture didn't feel right whenever I was there doing that visit. And also weird things that happened during the interview, because I know some districts have just interesting things that they do during the interview process. There was one time I interviewed at a school and they made me read a book right before the interview. It's a real short book. It had to do with, a red ball and coaching. There was some metaphor there, but it completely turned me off for the rest of the interview. I don't know if you experienced anything weird.
Not anything quite like that.
Yeah.
So now I'm interested.
Yeah.
But yes, you absolutely will pick up on those, just like you would pick up as a teacher, pick up on the cues inside the classroom. Go back to, you are now the student at that moment. Pick up on those clues. Be okay with knowing this is not comfortable for me. And that's a couple other questions I would make sure you ask. I would ask, is it a 10 or 12-month contract? You need to be able to budget. Is that something that's going to be comfortable for you? But the other one is, especially as you new teachers, ask about the mentoring program. Is there an actual mentor? Is there a program that you could look at? And is it just the first few weeks? Is it the first month? Hopefully, it's a full first year, and that's something you could reflect on at the end of that year and decide what you needed to do for the next year to be successful. And that also shows them that you're bought in for long term. So it's a win-win on both sides for that question.
Yeah, no, that's great that you brought it up, because I can say from the research side, right, the research is that if a first-year teacher doesn't have a mentor that is in their content field, so if you're a science teacher, you have a science mentor, and it would be better if you were a physics teacher having a physics mentor, but sometimes that doesn't always work out. But having a mentor within your content field is what leads to better retention, better job satisfaction, and just having a better work-life balance overall, because you have that mentor that can help you out within your own classroom. If you're a history teacher and you get a science mentor, that's helpful, but not the best situation. So yeah, I would say that is first and foremost something that you ask about is what's going on with the mentors. And I love your take on what's the duration of it, because if it's just a 1 week program, that's not great, But if it's something that is over a year and maybe potentially longer, then that's a potentially good district, good campus to work for.
Absolutely, it shows the buy-in and the support, which is something hopefully you're all looking for long term, because education is a lifetime passion, and hopefully lifelong learner for you, but also lifelong learner for your district and your school, because students change, people change, and we like that people constantly will reevaluate and make a great decision for their campus and their community. I
think one of the questions that I like to ask, and I never had to do a whole lot of interviews as an educator, but one of the questions I like to ask was kind of a two-parter. It was, what was the biggest success of your campus or district in the last 5 years? And then what is the biggest challenge you foresee in your campus or district in the next 5 years? And that allowed them to talk about financial issues. If you go into a district who's not in a good space financially, then that's going to be code for maybe no teacher raises over the course of years, or you don't have as much of a budget for classroom supplies. But if they can show successes, as being award-winning or having teachers that really care about what's going on, newsworthy things, I think that shows a district or a campus that really cares about what they're doing.
Absolutely. And having the plan for going forward, because challenges are not necessarily a bad thing. And you like that people have some vision for where they're going.
All right. So hard-hitting question here. What is a question that you're going to be asked in the interview? Everyone knows this question is coming, but it's just incredibly hard to prepare for. What's a question?
One of the questions that people do not like to answer because of the wording in it is, how do you handle failure, or describe a failure you have had in the past? Most people feel like this is a trap. They feel like, oh, they're waiting to see what I can't handle. Well, just remember the whole Edison adage that failure is nothing more than the way something didn't work. And so you want to be transparent with where you have run into a challenge. Could be in a project at school, could be on a sports team, it could be you failed a class. But what did you do after that? How did you pick yourself up? And what did you do with that to make yourself where you are today, which is obviously interviewing for a phenomenal job?
I don't think anyone ever likes to talk about their failures, but I agree with you. I think showing that you are willing to try and that you're able to overcome if you fail, I think is going to be one of the biggest things to show a potential employer, no matter what sort of job it happens to be. I know for me, as a teacher, I wanted to try new things. That was my thing. I couldn't do the same thing twice because that just made things boring. And if it happened to fail, then great. That just means that I found something that didn't work, just as you said, and I would try something new the next year. So I love that. I think a question that I always had an issue with or had trouble with was what's your greatest weakness? It's always paired with, what's your greatest strength, what's your greatest weakness. And it's that weakness side. I always tried to minimize, I guess, tried to say, well, like I'm a perfectionist, like I stick with something maybe too long because I want to see it be exactly perfect. Do you have any suggestions for that question on what's your greatest weakness?
I do. I absolutely do. Well, successes, don't be afraid to tell them. Doesn't mean you have to brag about that, but go ahead and tell them, what are you most proud of? It could be a sporting activity. It could be something in class. It could be something well outside of school at all. But be able to talk about that. On the flip side, when they ask you about weakness, which they will, take that and talk about, I have been challenged by fill in the blank, and then talk about, are you working on it right now? Were you able to overcome it already? Use that as a time to talk about where you have stopped, refocused, and changed your direction to be successful. In the Career Center, we call that piloting and pivoting.
Nice.
And you can use that terminology of something didn't work, so my team and I piloted something totally new, or we ran into this obstacle and we pivoted 180 degrees. Go ahead and talk about what you've done that shows enthusiasm and thoughtfulness and not just run into something and gave up.
Yeah, I think, districts do this all the time. They run pilot programs, like we're going to try this program out, we're going to try this program. And if it doesn't work or they get bad feedback, then they do something else, right? So
100%.
they can't fault a teacher for piloting something and it not working out because, at least they're showing a willingness to try something new, to make sure that their students have the best experience in the classroom. I think that is probably some of the best advice that we could probably give new teachers going out there is that you got to try. You got to try something different. Don't just do the same thing that you experienced. You got to try something different.
I think that's number one. And I think if you can always talk about how it's student-facing and what you're doing is trying to raise awareness, raise the level of education, raise the enthusiasm, the engagement in the classroom that has to do with students, you're going to get that support. And if it works, it may be something that other people want to follow. And if it doesn't, then you've given them the ground level to not do what you did, right? So there's no loss in trying something that is about your students and making it a better place.
Sometimes it's even worth showing the students, right, and trying something new.
Yes.
There's plenty of times in my classroom where I said, we're going to try this. I have no idea if it's going to work out, but we're going to try this. It's kind of like this podcast. I have no idea if this is going to take off, but we're trying it and we're seeing what happens. If any of the current or former TAMU student listeners, alumni of Aggie Teach, just alumni in general, want to learn more about the Career Center or you or what services you can offer, where can they find you online?
You can find me anywhere, but let's start with careercenter.tamu.edu. You can find all of the different colleges' career coordinators there. You can also find myself and our team on the Career Ready tab on the Arts and Sciences page. So there's multiple ways to get to us, and if you're on campus, just walk into the coldest building. We'd love to have you come visit.
And that is all the time that we have for today. So thank you, Barclay, for being a guest today. The Aggie Teach Momentum podcast drops every 2 weeks, so make sure that you are looking for the next episode on Spotify or linked on the Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences website. For more information, you can visit our program website at aggieteachartsci.tamu.edu. That's aggieteach, ARTSCI.tamu.edu. Thanks and gig 'em.